Olá, pessoal, tudo bem? Welcome to the Brazil Crypto Report podcast, where we talk to the builders, entrepreneurs, and influencers from across the Brazil crypto ecosystem. I'm your host, Aaron Stanley, and today I'm joined by two special friends of the show. First, we have Paulo Alves, who is the crypto editor at InfoMoney, which is one of Brazil's leading financial media publications. And we also have João Zecchin, who's one of the founders of Fuse Capital, a Web3 focused VC out of Rio. So today we'll be discussing the digital real, which is a central bank digital currency being developed by the Brazilian central bank. I know last week we had an episode with Gustavo Cunha where we discussed the digital real pilot that was launched recently and the central bank's track record of successfully implementing these transformative projects. But this is such a big topic that I wanted to bring in a couple of different viewpoints to discuss what this new infrastructure might look like. There's a lot of fancy language being thrown around here, like tokenizing financial systems and programmable money and EVM compatibility. And these are terms we hear a lot in crypto circles, but not so much from central banks. So this is quite novel in that respect. So today we're going to discuss a bit more of these ideas and how they might kind of impact the Brazilian financial system and perhaps even beyond. So before we jump in, let's do a couple quick intros. Paulo, why don't you give us a little background on yourself?
Okay, great. Well, first, thank you, Aaron, for having me again here. It's an honor for me. So, yeah, I'm a journalist at InfoMoney. So we started covering crypto more broadly since I don't know, maybe a little more than a year now. So we've been really focusing on Real Digital in the recent weeks. We've been following that, and I've been covering crypto since 2015, I guess. I didn't buy Bitcoin. Everyone asked me about that. Didn't buy Bitcoin at that time, but then I started to focus more on crypto coverage, mainly since the March 2020 crash. So yeah, it's been a really a long road since then. And now, yeah, I'm now at InfoMoney, and we're just looking at everything crypto and Real Digital. As we're going to talk furthermore. Really, has a really intersection with all this crypto thing. So yeah, it's one of our main topics right now.
Great, great. Yeah, never a dull moment, right? And over to you, João. What's your story?
Yeah, no, first, Aaron, pleasure to be here, especially joined by Paulo, such a great name in covering crypto locally in Brazil. I have a large history in crypto. I've invested in Bitcoin since 2012. Was part of the Ethereum kind of ICO, and then when we established Fuse Capital, we are trying to innovate the money management business, and we did the first ICO or STO of a venture capital fund in the region in Latin America, and we are entirely now crypto focused. We take a look at about 2,000 companies per year, invest in about five, and we're constantly trying to innovate the money management business. I think this is super important because it takes us not just as an investor, but as a kind of entrepreneur mindset, trying to figure out the future of money management through crypto, right? So we're developing a couple of products on that side, but it'll be a pleasure to discuss the CBDC. And I think we are in a exciting time in Brazil where the central bank is really trying to innovate and bring novel technologies to the monetary system, right? So it's a pleasure to be part of this discussion.
Amazing. So Paulo, why don't we get started with you? So you've been covering this, as you mentioned, as a journalist for some time now. It's one of your key areas. Why don't you kind of give us an overview, at least from your vantage point? What is sort of the central bank's like main objectives here? Like, what are they looking to accomplish with the Real Digital, and we'll kind of go into like what really makes this design unique here. But what are sort of the main objectives that they're looking to accomplish, and what sort of strikes you as most novel about this from your editorial perspective?
Sure. So yeah, as many CBDCs projects around the globe just focus a lot on payments, right? So you have China trying to overtake this duopoly in the digital payment sector. You have many more CBDCs just trying to issue their own digital currency just to try to make people make digital payments and bring more people to the banking system, right? So, but in Brazil, you have you have a little bit of turnaround here because Brazil is a very it's a third country, but you have very fast in digital inclusion, right? So people Brazilians like technology a lot. So and for example, Pix is just such a success story. Bank, the central bank launched Pix just a few years ago, and it's just so ubiquitous right now. So people just are already using more Pix than credit cards and debit cards in many cases right now. So uh, n- bringing people to digital payments not really a problem in Brazil right now. So the main focus of the CBDC is just trying to bring new products to people, and for example, just trying to create new tokenized assets and just trying to uh, include people in the financial system through this to digitalization. So the CBDC project in Brazil is not focused on payments because Pix already solves that problem. And it really focuses on this new concept of the programmable money, right? Which is already a lot known to the crypto enthusiasts. So we have Ethereum is a lot about that, right? So central bank is publicly being inspired by Ethereum, just trying to create a centralized version of all the innovation in the crypto sector, mainly inside Ethereum, to the Brazilian population. So the CBDC project in Brazil, the real digital focus right now is just to create innovative financial products to the population. So I guess this just summarizes and makes the reality digital really different from other global projects because, as Gustavo just said on your last show, um, this makes reality digital like a hybrid between a wholesale and um, what I forgot the word right now.
And a retail, right? Wholesale
Retail,
versus
right,
retail.
right,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Just trying to switch to English. To thinking about in English is it's hard when you write Portuguese all the time. But yeah, so it's a bit of a hybrid between wholesale and retail CBDC, right? So yeah, it's unique in that point. Some other countries are trying to create CBDCs wholesale and retail, but they are usually two different projects, and they are in really early stages. So in South Africa, for example, you have a really early stage project. There are retail and wholesale, but they're really just trying to understand how you can combine those two things. And it seems to me that central bank just found a perfect match between combining CBDC with private stable coins, just to try to combine these two concepts.
Yeah, and when I first read about the design, I think in one of Fabio Araujo's talks, or in one of the as the there was more reports coming out about how they were designing this. It was really kind of mind. I mean, once you've been in crypto for like long enough, it's hard to have like your mind like really blown by anything, right? You've kind of seen everything, but it was the whole idea of okay, the digital real itself will be used as a wholesale for settling wholesale transactions between banks and the central bank, and then banks will be allowed to issue their own sort of private central private stable coins pegged to the real against tokenized bank deposits, essentially. Was really kind of like wow, like that seems like it hits the nail on the head as far as how do you kind of unlock the benefits of this without just disintermediating the existing banking system, right? Because if everybody just has a retail account at the central bank, then why do you need like regular banks, right? So, or commercial banks. So João, would love to get your thoughts on what do you find just sort of most unique and innovative about this design, and would love to kind of get into a discussion about like what new types of products could we be unlocking here that I mean, obviously there's efficiency gains with certain things that you can unlock with more fluid flows of capital, but I think the exciting thing about asset tokenization and the ability to tokenize things in this context means that there's just new products that can be unlocked that wouldn't have existed otherwise. So I'd love to kind of get your sort of stream of thinking on these topics here.
Yeah, just to I think iterate what Paulo just said, like Brazil has one of the most advanced financial systems in the world, right? We talk to companies all over the world, and they just don't understand that in Brazil we don't have the money transfer kind of use case for crypto, right? The instant money transfer. Pix took care of that. Pix is actually a technology that's kind of based on blockchain, where you have the private keys and the public keys are exposed as your email or CPF or whatever. So Brazil is really this interesting market where different types of technologies apply to use cases in Brazil than elsewhere in the world, right? So copycats in Brazil really don't go really far. But what I think is interesting about this technology is I was just at East Denver last week, and there were two main topics, right? So ZK rollups, which is really interesting for the KYC part, combined with privacy, which is going to be really important because all of these wallets are currently transparent, and right, you don't want people seeing your bank account, your bank statements, which is also going to be something that's interesting to integrate with the local CBDC in Brazil at some point, since it's so programmable or so composable with other technologies. But I think the main topic that especially interests us at Fuse is the real world asset tokenization, right? So this has been kind of a ongoing kind of debate that currently DeFi specifically, the products that are there, they're not very sustainable in terms of yield and returns, and they're not a really good financial product, as we say, right? So the new CBDC opens the door for real world assets to be tokenized and custodied on the blockchain in a more secure manner, right? Because since you have the regulation to do this, and you're going to have institutional players starting to work with this technology, this opens the door for all assets that currently produce yield to be built on the backbone of the CBDC, right? So these can be debt assets, credit assets. These can be commodities, which for Brazil is super important. And using the rails of crypto, this opens the door for a huge flow of capital from abroad to access the Brazilian market without any type of constraints or any type of atrito, right? Of any type of hurdle for this capital to access, right? So I think this is the most interesting part for us is just that this technology opens this door, and I'm interested in seeing the types of companies that come up with interesting types of products to create yield for the original consumer or the regular consumer on top of the technology, and the types of players on the institutional side, the banks, the custodians that start to adopt this new technology to custody real world assets on the blockchain, and open the door for composability and new things to be developed on top. I think that's the most interesting thing about the way that the central bank did this. And again, we can only do this because we don't have the problem of money transfer. The money transfer problem is the most obvious one, and we also still don't have the problems like of dollarization, right, or savings in dollars. And something that's also interesting to mention is Brazil is a really high velocity currency, the BRL, right, because we don't have a really high savings rate. So these were technologies that were needed along the way. Because of the characteristics of our economy in Brazil. So I think we are in a really interesting spot, and I'm really excited for what's going to happen in the next years in Brazil.
Yeah, that's a super interesting perspective. I really appreciate that, and it's interesting that just coming from East Denver, and you've kind of got your mind is sort of fresh with talks of ZK rollups and privacy, and how can all these things kind of be integrated into. I mean, I guess when most people think of a CBDC, they generally don't really have like the best sort of reputation in crypto, where people think of these things as kind of like a boogeyman surveillance state tool type of thing. But it seems like what we have here is, I mean, there's a really interesting kind of hybrid between. There's always over the course of kind of blockchain history, there's always been this tension between kind of the the closed permission systems and the open systems, and they kind of the pendulum kind of swings back and forth, and there's some attempts here and there to kind of merge the two, but they never really get like adopted, or for various reasons. But I mean, Paulo, in your view, I mean, do you see this is this maybe kind of the potential sort of, is this the marriage between kind of these two systems, right? Is this have we maybe kind of, are we hovering over the target here? Does that make sense?
Well, I think everybody's trying to learn together how to well, governments are trying to learn how they can just tap into all of these innovation inside crypto. and bring into the financial system without bringing the risk as well, right? So it's interesting because we saw central bank just learning, publicly learning how they could do this, how they reached this current design along the past years. The central bank started, for example, talking about the CBDC as a retail CBDC. So Campos Neto, Roberto Campos Neto, which is the central bank governor, said that he wanted to the people to use DeFi solutions, and that's why Real Digital was going to be launched. So he indicated several times that Real Digital was going to be retail CBDC. But along the way, they talking to banks, they started to learn that this would just diminish so much the role of the banks in the financial system, and probably bring a lot of problems along the way. So they started to bring up the idea to merge wholesale and retail CBDC, and it started to change last year. So it's not a new thing. So the central bank talked a lot about this the last Monday when they launched the pilot, but it's been a discussion since last year. I interviewed the Stellar CEO last year during Consensus in June last year, and by that time she was already praising the central bank choose of design for the Real Digital, mainly because it wouldn't diminish the role of the banks in the intermediation of the economy. And this week, Moody's already was praising this design as well. I have this. Well, I just cannot let I cannot not be a journalist, but let me quote Moody's. They said that by not allowing retail customers direct access to the CBDC, the central bank dampens the risk of deposit outflows from banks that could reduce funding availability for the financial system. So we in Brazil are in the merge of a credit crunch crisis, right? So we have this Americanas crisis, which was a really big retail company that just went burst in the last month or so, and we are in the merge of a credit crisis. And the last thing the central bank would want is to just to indicate that the real digital would have an impact on banks right now, right? So I guess they are trying to bring innovation from crypto industry, but try to diminish as much as they can all the risks they may come with it.
Got it. And I think the one of the interesting areas here is like, obviously crypto is, crypto is kind of built around this idea of like we don't need banks, like unbank yourself, like be your own bank. You hear these kind of fluffy narratives all the time, right? But I mean, in reality, it's like you can't just like do away with the entire existing financial system and just everybody just use Celsius or something as your bank. It's not going to work, right? We've kind of learned that the hard way this year, right? So it seems like there's there's this dance of I think it's kind of what I was getting at my last question as well. There's kind of this dance between how like disruptive do we actually want to be, right? As an industry, it's like, okay, we're disruptive up to a certain point, but then we kind of need to like play ball with the bank. I think the industry is really reckoning with that this year now with all these kind of failures and collapses, and you hear these jokes on Twitter of people saying that the best way to make money in crypto is to be a bankruptcy lawyer or something, right? Stuff like that. But I guess the question and Joe, I'd like your take on this as someone who's got a TradFi background as well as pretty immersed in crypto. But is there is the Real Digital project, is this sort of striking like the happy medium between like bringing the disruption of crypto and like the potential of blockchain technology and tokenization with kind of sound principles of the existing financial system that that we want to keep, basically, right? Are we striking kind of the happy, like the right medium here, the right balance?
I think so. I think it's a pendulum, right? You don't want to destroy the current system, but you want to evolve it, right? So you want to take small steps in the right direction, and I see this as the step in the right direction. Something interesting is that this central bank has had this kind of agenda of increasing competitivity between the banking system, which has been very productive for the local market. So I understand the arguments of the crypto hardcore or OGs, where they are unbank yourself, and the arguments there are pretty strong actually, because if you take a look, all the decentralized kind of platforms, none of them went bust. Of course, you have the hacking, and that's what kind of breaks down that argument. But if you want to have this mainstream and have institutional capital, have real money going through crypto, have actually a billion users, which is what everyone talks about getting to, you have to have easy ways for this to adapt to the current financial system, right? This is something that I say all the time, that regulation is always welcome. They'll bring volatility. We care a little bit of, we don't care a lot about price, so we care more about the technology, and we think regulation is super pro technology. But I'm always criticized for saying this by the hardcores, right? People think crypto needs to be free, crypto needs to be individually controlled. But we really have a vision that this technology can really influence the current financial system in a positive way, right? And as Paulo said, in Brazil we have this kind of liquidity crunch with the Americanas event, but this has been happening globally, right? We've been taking a look at regional banks in the U.S., and been a big crunch there as well with the rise in interest rates. So we feel that it needs to be one step at a time. As you asked, I think this is the right amount of innovation for the banks, to digest. These are big banks. We're talking in Brazil. They have a slow turnover time for implementing technology. They need to digest it and implement. So if it's something overwhelming, too much innovation, or you need to implement something that is ultimately against their financial interests, it's harder for them to adopt. So I think if you take it, like a medicine, a little pill at a time, it's easier for us to move in the right direction. And we feel that institutionally, this is the right direction for the market.
And Paulo, in the course of your reporting, what's been the response from banks in Brazil, right? And I think maybe some context just around the history of the Brazilian banking system. It's been very kind of an oligopolistic system for some time, and only recently, until maybe 10, 15 years ago, we started seeing the rise of Nubank and some other these challenger banks, digital banks popping up that have, partly at the spurring of the central bank, trying to introduce more competition. And obviously, when you're enjoying an it's hard to say that word, oligopolistic system. Is that how you say that? I'm not even sure. But anyway, it's you're not exactly like you don't really want more competition coming in, right? Because you're doing pretty well as it is, right? So, so is this a system that banks have been excited about? Are they kind of nervous about it? Or do they really understand what's going to be asked of them? How are the banks? Maybe a subsequent follow-on question, and maybe João would like to get you to weigh on this as well. But like, how does this kind of increase more competition in the Brazilian banking system writ large? But we'll turn over to you, Paulo, first, and then João, if you want to weigh in.
So yeah, I think I talked recently to a Febraban official, which is to the banking association, federal association in Brazil, and the banks say that they like innovation. Well, officially they say they are on board with all of this, um, but then they say they didn't make as much money with transaction fees, for example. This is why they were on board with Pix, because they are understanding that these kinds of innovations are important to bring more people into the financial system, and then they make money really with credit, right? So the more people enter the system, the more money they make with credit. So I think they are trying to come on board with central bank with all these innovations, because they see this as an opportunity to just bring more people to banks, to the banks in general. And they lost a bit of revenue with fees with Pix. For the people that don't know, Pix is a free transaction method, instant payment method. So regular people don't pay to send money. Companies do pay, but it's a lot less than before. So before, banks used to charge a lot for simple transactions. That they don't do this right now anymore. But but as I see, as some people from banks told me, they just are coping with this loss of revenue, just trying to expecting more people to enter the system. And that's really what we saw in the last 2 years, two in a bit years since Pix went out. So a lot of people entered the system. Just they many millions of people just made their first digital transaction for the first time using Pix. So I guess, well, my guess would be that they're expecting that this kind of movement will just continue with Real Digital. I mean, more people will just come on board and put more money into banks, and then the credit, the banks will make just more money with credit, right? So I guess they're trying to balance the loss of fees with this.
Yeah, just on my side, I think to be really frank and upfront, I think the banks, they are in a position in Brazil. They were at least before the fintech kind of revolution, very comfortable, right position. You had five big banks, not a lot. They had a really advanced financial system, but a lot because of fraud. Right in Brazil, we had a really high level of fraud, and again, the velocity of money was super quick because we had really high inflation. So they had this really advanced financial system, but when you talk about innovation of products to the retail customers, they were really lacking, right? There was not a lot of innovation. So to be really sincere, I think the banks they're not fully liking innovation, because it's bringing more competitivity and it's bringing more people to the market. It's opening up the market, right, for other players. But I feel that they need to be on board, and I feel that they need to get away from this comfortable position and start innovating themselves, right, and start doing M&A, and this heats up the market and it's good for the market, for everyone, right? So I feel that the banks are going along and playing ball with the central bank. In the end of the day, I think it's going to be good for everyone, but they kind of need to leave that comfortable position, because other people are going to access the market. You're going to have other types of composability with this new technology. So we'll see what happens, but I think in the end, for them, it's maybe a little bit of a hard pill to swallow, but it's good for them in the end, right?
Yeah, and I think to the bank's credit, a lot of these folks, the large banks in Brazil, especially the kind of the digital banks, the new banks, have been pretty forward, progressive, leaning on crypto. Vis-a-vis what we have in America and in Europe, where it's they're offering, or they're either offering or they're in the process of offering different crypto brokerage services, custodying services. Itaú is ramping up like a whole digital assets division. Like Banco do Brasil just announced that they're going to facilitate like paying taxes in crypto. I'm not personally super excited with that use case, but it's a step in the right direction. So I think to their credit, they have been kind of taking some steps in the right direction here, and I'd like to kind of maybe shift to kind of the asset tokenization angle of this, because as we've mentioned before, like the money transmission use case for crypto in Brazil is pretty much non-existent, right? And even Roberto Campos Neto has mentioned this a bunch of times, where he really sees crypto and digital assets more as property or as investment products essentially. And you do have a real kind of booming asset tokenization. Well, I shouldn't say booming, but it's like there's a lot of interesting things happening, right? People doing interesting experiments with tokenizing carbon credits or real estate or football clubs, or all sorts of various things, or receivables and things that are generating generating yield, generating generating some returns. And Brazilians have an affinity for kind of fixed income products, and would love to kind of talk a bit about like what new types of, when we're talking about like tokenization of the financial system, like what new types of products can we expect to see here, or what types of products maybe do you see that are maybe just being experimented with right now, really kind of gaining some traction, if this digital real kind of system works out, infrastructure works out the way that it's being pitched initially. João, do you want to go first, and then would love Paulo to get your thoughts there.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, the tokenization market has been booming in Brazil. I think there's a lot of companies that are trying to address this problem on the use cases you mentioned. What we see is that the tokenization is it's still kind of fragile because it depends on this tie between the regular system and the Web3 system, right, and crypto. And this tie is usually done by contracts and that put that in place, right? And what we see with the Real Digital that can be possible is the real ownership on the blockchain by having an institutional custodian with fallbacks for that ownership, right? So if you had real ownership in the blockchain, let's say you had your real estate tokenized and the ownership was on the blockchain and you lost your keys, well, you lost your real estate if that was really tokenized and really on the blockchain and really right, the ownership was there. So what you have currently is almost a synthetic to the asset, which is one to one with the returns the asset is producing, which is okay. But what we see with this, institutional framework that's being developed around the Real Digital, with companies already working on this, is for you to have real ownership on the blockchain and a lot more security when you are transferring this asset around, right? So let's say the real estate, when you transfer the tokens related to the real estate, you're just transferring the tokens. You still need to go on the other side on a cartório or a notary and register the transfer. So that's why I say it's a synthetic, because you still have this Web 2 or Web 1 kind of job you need to do to complete that transfer, right? So with this institutional framework, you could have that transfer work seamlessly by being recognized by the state as a digital asset and digital ownership, right? So we're really excited about this part, and I think it's going to be extended to eventually to all asset classes. Of course, everyone starts with financial asset classes. That's already a very digital asset class and very easily tokenized. So you talked about receivables. We're actually working on a project where we are, you know, creating a protocol to access receivables from Brazil, which is already digital. Everything is done through APIs. But eventually, you are going to move on to, for example, agricultural assets or assets that are very they are organic and they are harder to represent on the blockchain in a digital form. But eventually, the technology will get there, and we'll have these assets on the blockchain. So I think the surface area with the transfers and instant settlement and the trust that is kind of established on chain is going to move all assets that we have on chain and increase the velocity of those assets and the openness of this asset for any investor in the world to invest in this. So this increases a lot of the competition and decreases rates for the end users in the end of the day, right? So whoever is the merchant that is tokenizing that receivable, in the end of the day, if they have access to global capital, more capital, the result of this is going to be lower interest rates, which is super good for our economy, who always had extremely high interest rates and decreases the level of entrepreneurship. So we see this as the end game is having everything on chain, everything tokenized in an institutional fallback where people will have more trust on the system, and it's going to be more secure for everyone to tokenize their assets.
Paulo, do you want to weigh in there?
Well, maybe I just like to compliment on saying with a bit of context on why this tokenized assets thing it really makes a lot of sense in Brazil. Uh, uh, Differently from other Latin America countries, the whole use case of crypto being a payment system, as João already said, doesn't make much sense in Brazil. And also, just to use crypto as a means of bringing dollars to the economy also doesn't attract the Brazilians. What? So it's natural that this kind of innovation just moves towards investment vehicles. So last year I talked to people from El Salvador, for example, just to trying to understand how the Bitcoin crash just impacted their day-to-day lives, and they just told me that it didn't impact anything because Bitcoin they're just used for instant transactions, so they just convert everything to dollars, or and it's just that, so it doesn't matter the price of Bitcoin. And this is something that for the Brazilian perspective just doesn't make much sense, because to Brazil, crypto is just for investment. So this tokenization thing, if is just eliminates intermediation in a way that you uh, you save money in the process and make the final investment product more attractive to the end user, to the client. So the Brazilian people just, it's natural for them to look to pay a bit more attention to tokenized assets if they offer a bit more return on their money. So it's really you see today fixed return products are really, starting to grow right now. And it's not a coincidence that Brazilians just like a lot more of this kind of products, because they see investment opportunities as a way of adopting crypto as a means, as a, how can I say, uh, they are more easily convinced to adopt crypto if they can make a bit more money with it. So I guess this would be a natural use case for Brazil.
Yeah, and it seems like there's a nice product market fit there that you might not necessarily have in other markets, or it might take a bit. You might need to induce people a bit more actively to actually use or purchase these products than in Brazil, where people are already a bit more kind of have an eye toward these fixed income products. Um, One other, Paulo, I wanted to just throw one other question at you regarding the central banks. They have a kind of it's called the Lift Lab, right? This innovation lab where they've been incubating some, they've chosen some various projects to basically build out kind of test use cases using this digital real infrastructure. And I was hoping you could tell us a bit about that, and if there's any projects that have been involved in this that you find particularly interesting. I know there's been things around, like transferring, kind of, making like payments for cars, or like settling transactions for car titles and things like that. So I was hoping you could tell us a bit more about that, and then João, if you want to weigh in on that too, would love to get your thoughts there as well. But let's start with Paulo.
Yeah, sure. So central bank just chose 9 different projects to try to come up with different use cases for Real Digital. So I think the way I see is just they're trying to show test the technology, and at the same time just to show the population on why they're developing this and how this will be used on their day-to-day lives, right? So I guess two projects just come to my mind that are really interesting. One is from a securitization firm called Vert. They started to test how tokenized real could be used to stimulate the banks to offer more credit to rural activities, just to agricultural activities. So they created a platform where you can use the money you borrowed only to buy certain products related, just fertilizers and other product related with that activity, because today the credit for that sector is just not that much available, because they really have many struggle a lot of struggle to audit all the expenses from the companies that borrow the money. So it's a great use case for Brazil, which is a very it's agricultural uh, you know juggernaut in the world. So if you have the possibility just to increase credit for this kind of activity, I guess it will be more. It's a great motive for people just to come on board with all this real digital thing. And another project from Tech Band, which is a ATM company, which is curious, right? Because Real Digital is a completely digital money, and ATM company which believes that the physical money will not go away anytime soon, just came on board, and they came up with this solution to use tokenized money, digital money, Real Digital, whatever, just to make online purchases more secure. Though they came up with this smart locker that when you open the locker and take your purchase, your product that you bought, and then a smart contract just triggers and sends the money to the store, to the sender, the seller, right? So I guess it's a good example on uh, uh, how things out of the financial system, just it's an e-commerce thing, can really benefit from the real digital. So central bank um, is going to have an event in April right now, the Lift Day, when they will just disclose all of their findings on all of these 9 projects that were selected last year. It began September last year, and you have many companies like Visa, Aave, many big companies just trying to experiment with this. I am really looking forward to this event actually.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you have a mix of kind of TradFi companies, you have a mix of kind of fintech companies, and then also just pure crypto like Aave or Stellar or some of these other folks. So the cohort that they selected was really interesting, just on the makeup, the demographics of the people that they select or the groups that they selected to be involved. That was really interesting. João, did you have anything you wanted to weigh in on? Have you been following any of these projects at all?
Actually, my partner Dan is a part of it. I haven't followed them a lot, but what I think it's interesting to mention is that like this sandbox model that I think was initially kind of developed by the CVM, which is the local SEC, something that's been very productive for the market, right? We had this in the insurance sector, we had this, of course, in the regulatory sector, and now in the central bank. So I think this is a model that came up in Brazil that really, drives innovation because they are exempt from a bunch of regulation. And it's something that we should keep forward. On these sandbox projects, what I think it's interesting to look at is how these projects are actually building on top of, right, not just on top of the real digital, but how are they opening the doors for people to build on top of them, actually implementing composability, right? So on the locker example that Paulo gave from the ATM company, it's interesting to understand how people can build different products on top of that money release for the store. So can you implement a credit strategy there? Instead of paying, D0, can you implement some type of credit strategy for the user to pay, installments, which is so common in Brazil. So that can be a totally different company. So all of these these 9 companies open the doors for, another, 20 companies probably to build on top of them and create other implementations. And I think that's super productive.
Great, super helpful. Thank you for that context. We've got about 10 minutes ish here left, and I wanted to shift over and just talk a bit more about we've been trying to talk about like what are some of the benefits of this, and how is the financial system going to benefit? How is entrepreneurs and the kind of the startup ecosystem perhaps going to benefit from this? But I'd like to maybe talk a bit more about some of the do something like cost benefit analysis here. Because obviously with every new innovation, like there's always gonna be some winners, there's gonna be some losers. Especially when the government is driving sort of innovation policy, for better or for worse, kind of is what it is. But there's always gonna be some winners, there's always gonna be some losers, right? And it may be too early to really like identify any of this, super closely, but would love to just kind of think about what are some of the costs that might be incurred here. Obviously, like with something like Pix. Pix has been a phenomenal success, but Paul, as you mentioned earlier, banks have been incurring fewer revenue in the form of transaction fees as a result of Pix. Consumers are potentially they're using it, they like the product, but now your financial data is just a lot more available and sort of, I guess, surveillable, controllable via the central bank. There's a choke point there, right? Like you can't, you can only spend a certain amount of money, after like midnight, for example. Some of this is for safety precautions, right? In case you get mugged on the street, the robber can't just drain your bank account via Pix, right? So there is some, some safety precautions there, but at the same time, there is that you do have sort of the central bank as this choke point that's sort of intermediating your financial activity. And I just thinking maybe in terms of the various stakeholders here, you have kind of the large banks, you have maybe like larger companies, you have kind of smaller startup companies, you have retail users. Would love to kind of go down the line here and just, maybe do just kind of a brain dump here. What are some of the, who are some of the winners and losers here? What are some of the costs and benefits? I guess I'll toss that to whoever wants to take it.
I can take it. No
All
worries.
right.
No, but I think this is it's kind of easy because the losers are the ones that hold the biggest part of the pie right today. So the losers are the banks, right? But it's just a temporary volatility. I think it's just for them to adapt and also kind of innovate and implement this kind of entrepreneurial mindset, and implement new products because they have the best, market advantage to implement new products on top of this. So I think in the end of the day, the market is opening up for more competitivity. The biggest winner for sure is the consumer. So the consumer is going to have access to more products, cheaper products, more flow of capital. So products are going to get cheaper along the way. But the banks, right, initially they lose because they have a position that they can only lose because they are so big, right? So I think it's an adaptation, it's a process, and we have to trust this process. I understand the mindset of the central bank that is trying to implement new products, new competitivity, bringing more capital. So this is beneficial for the whole system on the long run. But initially, I think the banks are going to have some volatility and have to adapt. And if they are successful in implementing kind of this entrepreneurial mindset, they're going to be super successful because they have the biggest share of the pie, right? So my view is a little bit on top of that.
Well, as I said, Brazilian people are just they like technology a lot, but at the same time, Brazil is a very unequal country, right? So you have so many people that are not really, into they don't have access to technology as well. It's very, it's changing very rapidly. But I think I'm afraid that maybe all these innovations will also at the same time open doors for many more scams that are very common in Brazil, right? So I'm just curious to know how scammers are going to, use all this innovation and change many things changing at the same time, just to trying to tap into all of the doubts among the people, the regular people that are just not following all the innovations as we are, for example, us three. And so I'm afraid we'll have many problems on scams and people just not understanding what's the difference between real digital and Pix, the regular money, digital money, and all the drawbacks that can come from this regarding scams and people getting, just losing their money. Yeah, that's something that really really we'll just see. But considering the history from scams in Brazil, I guess it'll certainly be a problem we have to face.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point, and it's one I hadn't even thought of yet, to be honest. I mean, you have Brazil generally does have a financial education gap, right? There's inequality both in terms of income and wealth, but also just in terms of education. Um, even people who are educated, college educated, like the financial literacy is not like amazingly high, right? And you do see a proliferance of these kind of like Bitcoin pyramid schemes that are I mean, I've covered some of these things in my recent art. I mean, they're just like obviously pyramid schemes, and people keep investing in them. Um, and I think if the three of us, I mean, we're in this industry full time, right? And we're sitting here trying to like wrap our heads around like what the heck is this digital real stuff? How is somebody who's not, just barely even heard of any of these concepts going to catch on and understand the difference between all these things? Like we're sitting here wondering, well, what's the difference between digital real and Pix, and like why do we even need the two if we already have one? Um, so that's a really interesting point. And I feel like there's not really an easy sort of answer to that question, unfortunately. Um, but I do think you're right in the sense that Brazilians, like kind of the superpower of Brazilians is that they're like early adopters of all these technologies, right? They figure out how to use these things. Like they're really good about like finding technologies to like work around bureaucracy, right? So instead of going to the store to get a banknote and then or get like a boleto payment, little payment slip, and have to do the QR, all these things, like, oh, let's just use Pix. It's like a lot easier, right? So people are pretty good at finding ways around these things, but people are also very good at like exploiting these things to create scams and sort of get rich quick schemes and that type of thing. But anyway, it's sort of, I'm not sure there's an easy answer to that question, but that is an important point that I honestly haven't really thought about yet with regards to digital real.
And Aaron, just
Go
one
ahead.
on that. that's, as I mentioned, like that the Brazilian financial system is a lot more evolved than other systems in the world because of that amount of scams, right? So that in the end of the day, and for the pigs, actually, there's also this, because of scams, banks actually developed a new product which is like pigs insurance. So you see how the wheel kind of turns in Brazil, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be the same with Real Digital. There are going to be scams, for sure. People are gonna lose money, but I think the system's going to adapt and evolve again, as we have evolved in the past, to create the safety nets for retail users who need them.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's wrap it up here. I mean, we'd love to just get some final thoughts from both of you, and then we'll wrap it up. Paulo, do you have anything else you wanted to add, or any other thoughts that have been sort of percolating in your mind here as throughout this conversation?
Well, I think I'm during 2023. I'll be looking forward to see how banks are going to, pressure the central bank and try to change the CBDC project their own way. We see a little bit of that in PIX, because central bank tried to make PIX free for everyone, including companies, and the banks just say, "Hey, wait a minute, we have to have the right to charge companies use PIX," and then they changed it a little bit. So I'm just curious to see how banks are going to influence central bank and try to change a little bit the CBDC project in their own way. But yeah, I think we're all going to learn a lot about this during this year.
João, any final thoughts from you?
Oh man, I'm just excited for this year. It's going to be an interesting year for Brazil. I see a lot of international interest for Brazil, especially having talked to a lot of companies abroad. I understand this point Paulo made, that's a kind of a tug of war between the banking sector and the central bank. But I think we just need to applaud the central bank for the all of these initiatives that Roberto Campos Neto has promoted. So I think I'm excited for his final 2 years in term, and I think there's still a lot to come, a lot that he can accomplish. So I think it's an excellent time to be a Brazilian investor in this sector, and the opportunities are going to be amazing, right? So I think I'm just excited. I think it's going to be a great year.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much to both of you for joining, and we will include some links to your respective profiles so folks can find you, folks can reach out to you. And really appreciate all of your time, and thanks everyone for listening. We'll be back soon.